Hi everyone, thank you for coming. I'm John, one of the owners of the gallery, and we're thrilled to have everyone here. We're stationed and sitting in our environmentally themed show, Man-Made: A State of Nature, tonight. And so if you haven't, I think a lot of you have checked out the show before, but if you haven't, please stay a few minutes afterwards and check it out. And so we are thrilled to have Michelle Cacho Negrete with us tonight, paired with our environmental show. She is a writer, environmental activist, and she will be reading her award-winning and Pushcart-nominated essay, Winter, which was published in the Union of Concerned Scientists Anthology, Thoreau's Legacy. Michelle is a retired social worker here in Portland and a full-time writer. 4 of her essays have been selected as Notable of the Year and won Best of the Net. Her work is in 4 anthologies in addition to Thoreau's Legacy, and her essay, Tell Me Something, is in the Norton College Anthology. 6 of her essays have been nominated for Pushcart Prizes, and Street Kid was a runner-up in the Brooklyn Literary Arts Contest. She's had 60 publications, and among others, The Sun, North American Review, Solstice Literary Magazine, Under the Sun, and Silk Road. After the 2016 election, Michelle and 3 other women formed a free feminist speakers bureau that goes to high schools, colleges, and other organizations to explain women's history, women's rights, abuse against women, and ways to move forward. And with that, we are thrilled to have you here tonight with us, Michelle.
Thank you. Let me start by saying Greenhut is one of my favorite galleries. And so can everyone hear through the mic, or do I have to go like this? We're all set, okay. Greenhut is one of my favorite galleries, and I spend a lot of time wandering through here with great lust when I look at everything on the walls. So, I mean, they've never struck a false note. It's pretty phenomenal. So again, I'm just really honored to be here and to be a part of the environmental show. And so this is sort of, whoops, wow. My apologies in advance, but parts of this are metal. And so I have to be really careful not to get too close to something else that's metal, because then you'll just hear all these strange sounds, and they are not coming from my stomach. So at any rate, I have books back there, and Winter is from that book. It is greatly edited down because I would not make anyone sit here while I read with this Brooklyn accent for a whole hour. It would just be insufferable. So if anybody wants to read the entire essay, it's in there, and I will get started. So the name of this essay is Winter, something we're all familiar with, but we're talking about global climate change, and I wanted to begin this with something from dealing with summer. This is first part of a poem by an absolutely phenomenal Maine poet. And so I'm just reading the first stanza of it because, like all writers, I'm greedy for your time. This is called Demeter. This was the year there was no rain and the harvest failed. People ate beans from their stores first, seasoned with briny black olives and served with mushrooms from the field, and such scant loaves as they could make from gleaned grain. There were riots in the city when jobs failed to pay, and foreign merchants refused us trade and credit. And this poem reminds me so much of what's happening in different parts of the world. Now, a lot of the poems in this book are not that profoundly sad. A lot of them are very funny, so highly recommended. It's It's hard to do things one-handed, so everybody has to bear with me, especially when I turn pages. Okay, winter. Winter blasts us with 4 blizzards nearly back-to-back. Snow explodes, avalanches tumbling from a swollen sky. By mid-afternoon, opaque waves of white render every other color obsolete. Swift sheets of wind shape fleeing ghosts that haunt corners and circle trees. The snow provides its own brightness, sucking up residual sunlight and beaming it back to us like a flat, cold sun. We're prepared. Split wood column beside the wood stove, a can of maple syrup for sugar on snow, flashlights in every room. Kevin, my husband, has a stack of New Yorker magazines. I'm reading a book on the Inuit, a culture inseparable from and reliant upon winter. The Inuit word for winter is also the word for year, and the long Maine winter can indeed feel like a year. The Inuit consider extreme conditions and the lengthy absence of daylight a time for dreaming, storytelling, communicating with the spirits, as if the distraction of sunlight obfuscates clarity. It's an enviable purity, similar to the Buddhist philosophy of seeing the world as it is and finding joy in it. The fire crackles, spit sparks of red and blue, the air redolent with burning wood. Our house, a warm cave carved into the cold, has grown a shell of snow. Pines jitterbug to a fierce melody. Chickadees dart at bird feeders, then soar away as though snatched by the wind. There is never a day that we don't go out. The Inuit word silla roughly translates as the breath of the world, consciousness, weather, and so much more. And we crave silla. In late afternoon, we dress in snowsuits, strap on snowshoes, battle the wind for control of the door, and go out. A merciless gust steals my breath. Stiffness seizes me as though my limbs are frozen. The air vibrates, a wind instrument playing a tuneless scale. We shoo across the backyard into the woods, where we're sheltered by pine and hemlock, branches bowed beneath a snowy weight. The orange flagging Kevin tied to individual trees to mark a path is hidden by snow that is caterpillared up tree trunks. We look for landmarks, but there's been a shift, the familiar and unfamiliar residing in each other. We've been relocated to a country of ephemera, growing mounds of snowdrifts, miniature hills birthing on tree boughs, newly recorded animal markings that vanish as we watch. Kevin brushes tree trunks with a gloved hand, seeking flags with little success, and we concentrate instead on plowing through the white world around us. Thick layers cover our boots and threaten the theft of our snowshoes. Our journey narrated by snowshoe tracks splayed out behind us. Just as birds ate Hansel and Gretel's breadcrumbs, the falling snow will eat our tracks. Sorry. There is a joke in Maine. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. But this year's contrasts have been startling. The preceding week brought 50 to 55 degree temperatures, broke weather records, and deposited a false patina of spring. Kevin and I strolled nearby Agunquit, a tourist town mostly shuttered in winter. Kevin, a research scientist whose work involves trees and global climate change, paused to examine prematurely sprouting pussy willows, those very precursors of spring. Nearly 2 months early, he said, running his fingers over the buds. The willows were not alone in their confusion as to what season it was. Oak and maple buds were swelling, the sharp tips of daffodils poking through layers of slushy ice. We walked between two closed hotels to reach Marginal Way, a cliff walk mobbed with natives taking advantage of the warmth. The cliff path winding along the ocean was alternately puddled or icy as snow from the previous week had repetitively melted and froze. We'd all regressed to clumsy toddlers as we gingerly navigated patches of ice. The ocean smacked the cliffs with thick veils of white foam as waves lifted and dropped with unrestrained power. The sky was the flat blue of blown glass and temporarily cloudless. I understood the perils of global climate change, yet couldn't help feeling energized after a week of shrouded skies. The sun's rose-tinged descent by 4 o'clock seemed incongruous with the spring weather, as though warmth could somehow extend daylight. We headed home, reluctant to let go of the day. Our son called just as we got there, told us about taking his daughters, 2-year-old Sadie and 4-year-old Kaylee, out to the park near his house. I spoke briefly to each as they informed me with some sadness that their snowman had melted. I told them that the opportunity to build other snowmen was likely. The following morning, the temperature dropped sharply, and snow pounded us as though revenging the warmth of the previous days. Those soaring temperatures had encouraged the formation of vernal pools in our woods way ahead of their traditional spring arrival. The Inuit call spring when the earth receives its first water, and vernal pools, the first water, are spring's welcome harbingers, sacks of snowmelt that nourish various species from infancy to adulthood. There seemed a literary quality to this juxtaposition of winter and spring crammed together, how the fiery heat of snow against my cheeks echoed July's sun, a reminder of the smooth flow of the seasons. I marveled at how nature had perfected a continuum carefully balanced to sustain life, each season's process one of birth and death. Spring laboriously conquering winter, summer's abundance running rampant over spring, autumn's blazing takedown of summer, winter's shortened days forcing life underground, then the expanding light of spring, renewing the cycle. Kevin and I have watched the growing disruptions with dismay, autumnal breaks in summer with 40-degree weather that incite premature senescence in trees, spring-like fissures in winter, rising temperatures waking buds that will freeze in the plunge back to frigidity. Seasonal havoc occurring more frequently and more intensely each passing year. Late afternoon's last gasping bursts of snow herald the end of the latest storm. The yard was a pale lunescape that ran into the darkness of the woods. Winter in Maine is not just a season, but a location, signpost in layers of cold white drifts and gritty ice. Kevin went outside to snowblow the driveway while I raked the roof of the woodshed beside our buried deck, the raked snow contributing to the mountain that made roof and deck a single level. When I was done, I sat on my snow mountain and admired the variegated shades of soft gray that quilted the sky. The cold was so intense that breathing seemed an aerobic activity, yet peace had taken hold. The wind had stopped its moaning, and quiet was its own sound, although it's never really quiet. There's the rapid run of a squirrel up a tree, the flap of chickadees at the bird feeder, the marauding wind through the spruce and pine. Once, when I visited a friend in central Maine who lived near a frozen lake, we listened to the ringing, humming, groaning of cracking ice as the afternoon passed. The earth speaking, he told me with glowing face, and remembering that, I think, Scylla. Snow sometimes remains on the ground well into spring. That lingering snow is one reason winter feels a year long. Yet snow is vital to the ecology of Maine, indeed to all snow-laden areas. It's a blanket that insulates life germinating underground. The year we had little snow and frigid temperatures, half our garden plants didn't return, crops suffered, and there was a shortage of food for migrating birds. The next morning, I pull on mittens, jacket, and snowshoes and slide down the slope of snow-curved steps. I shoo into the woods, striped by thin ribbons of light that christen treetops with brightness and offer a broken path of radiance. Everything shimmers. 1,000 shafts of sun like a fire in the snow. I pass between trees as if through doorways, slide down small hills, find my way around the vernal pools packed with leaves and lichen-dressed twigs pressed beneath ice-like cloudy glass. I kneel to peer in at a complicated sculpture of lacy green lichen, rough brown twigs, curling russet leaves, white birch bark. The sun moves overhead, and my shadow is suddenly part of the sculpture, reminding me that in Inuit dialects, the word for man is interchangeable with the word for shadow. By February, midwinter, a deep cold sets in. Kevin and I dress in so many layers to go out we feel like mummies. The wind is frequently biting, black ice everywhere, walking treacherous. But we go outside, breathe with the world, center consciousness, Scylla, as winter wraps that world with its frosty breath of life, and we offer thanks and hope for its continuance. We hear more frequently now meteorologists speak about unseasonable cold here, unseasonable heat elsewhere, droughts, monsoons, mudslides. Inuit believe shaman on mystical journeys accept responsibility to atone for tribal transgressions and to restore balance in the everyday world. Outside, in the dwindling light, amid skeletons of oak and maple, I mourn for our children and for our grandchildren, forced to take on that responsibility, atoning to the planet for the ways their forebears have mistreated it. By February's end, I yearn for brightness to lengthen days, become an expanded highway between shortening nights. Each winter, incremental increases of daylight after solstice are so gradual that I don't experience them until one morning everything seems to explode into light. I envy the Inuit, firmly centered in the cold, mystical qualities of a world with intermittent light. I resolve to work harder, to make these short days more productive, to further appreciate the austere, sculptural beauty of the winter landscape, to fully nourish myself with darkness, to live in the present moment. I drive to Massachusetts to meet Carl and my granddaughters the following week. On a 45-degree day of bright sunlight, we're spending the afternoon at the Parker River Refuge, a natural barrier island of 4,662 acres of dunes, beaches, salt marshes, mini forests of thickets and shrubs. When I arrive at his house, the snow is branded as it is in all cities, with streaky car exhaust, muddy footprints, debris. However, on the shady boardwalks winding through the refuge, snow has retained some pristine element. Bright gold slits through the mixed canopy overhead and fires snow like flecks of mica, mantles this natural world with an enticing sheen. The boardwalk is surrounded by Phragmites, a 16-foot grass with feathery waving tops. Rhizomes. Their underground hollow stems need little to careen across marshes, and this invasive species has taken over completely. But their thousands of plumes fanning the air is magnificent. We break off a stem for each girl. They march along the boardwalk, waving these furry flags which tower over them. Later, we walk out to the banks where the Parker River mirrors the fiery globe of the setting sun. Life flourishes here in the depth of winter. Ducks swim in iridescent groups, webbed feet paddling like battery-powered toys. A northern harrier surveys its territory, a moment later soaring into the air, silhouetted against the sky. Temperatures lower in the shift from afternoon to evening, and scrub oaks shiver in a rising wind. After the unseasonable warmth of the day, the 20 or so degrees is sharply cutting. Cold, Sadie says. We nod agreement. Cold, Carl repeats. It's time to go home. As we turn up the path to our car, Kaylee points and says, "Look, the moon and the sun at the same time." As we stare, a dense cloud of starlings appears, their dark sheen and white spots paled by the lowering light, their peculiar vocalizations drifting through the air. As if to impress us, they execute the most precise, perfect series of swoops, darts, turns, aerial creatures of such grace that we are mesmerized by their pirouettes against a backdrop of purpling sky. Dancing birds, Sadie says, laughing and applauding. My granddaughters watch the ballet overhead, and then Kaylee throws her arms open, begins to slowly twirl, and a moment later to sing, her small voice blending with the cracks, flapping, and overhead cries. Her spontaneous song seems a part of the river, the birds, the trees. She sings out loud her relationship with the earth. An Inuit poet shaman said, "Songs are thoughts, sung out with the breath, with Scylla, when people are moved by great forces and ordinary speech no longer suffices. All my being is songs, and I sing as I draw breath." A moment later, Sadie emulates her older sister and begins to sing and spin also. Two tiny dervishes, arms stretched wide to welcome the winter night. Kaylee sings, "I love snow, I love the moon, I love stars." Sadie chimes in, echoing her sister. Their song is a chant, rhythmic and hypnotic, and in the descending darkness, part of winter's kaleidoscope. My granddaughters are traveling on their own mystical journey, flowing into the coldness and fading light without fear or reservation. Watching them stirs old memories of once being a child who welcomed each snowfall that draped my Brooklyn ghetto in mystery. I blew breath again and again to marvel at the white mist, sat on my fire escape nearly every night, swaddled in layers of clothes and blankets, thrilled by the early darkness that revealed winter constellations swirling overhead. I recently read a report stating spring now arrives 15 to 24 days earlier, disrupting the patterns of migrant birds, growing plants, insects. I fear it's swallowing more and more of the life-sustaining days of winter, of snow melting for the last time, leaving behind a different world, the sharp winter stars of Pegasus soaring over a sorrowful, scorched landscape. It seems to me that what I want is small, yet immense, that future generations of children will hear the wind hum through winter trees, will compose their own songs of snow and moon, will witness the geometric sketching of animal and bird tracks over frigid fields. Just as we reach our car, great flakes of white begin to tumble around us. Rain transformed to a state of grace. We pause. 4 tiny promontories of this vast earth we are all joined to. The sun, as it slips into the dark envelope of night, imbues the falling white with a final luminous radiance. The whisper of snow takes over the evening, and we stand quietly then, breathing in, breathing out, breathing in unison with our earth. That's it. Thank you. I'm prepared to answer questions, and my husband Kevin, who is a research scientist, can answer some questions, and Jenny, who wrote this wonderful book, can answer some questions. Joe Foster, who's an English teacher, can talk about my grammar. So what more could I want? Wow, I've left you all stunned and moved beyond words.
I just want to make a comment, Michelle, and I'll see if I can be coherent here. And that is that your writing is so exquisite. It's as if
Thank you.
put poetry into every line. And even though I've read this essay multiple times, and Joe and I have read it out loud to each other from your most wonderful book, I'm still stunned by it. I'm
Thank you.
stunned by the beauty of it, and I'm stunned by what you are describing,
Thank you.
both the dark and the light.
And this is Jane Sloven, who is a fabulous writer also. So I feel very honored by all the people who are sitting here in this audience. Okay, no questions? I have books for sale, and I'll even sign them. They are $20 each. And please look at the show and the rest of the gallery and enjoy yourselves. And thank you again for coming.